Maybe you've heard of this thing called JDM, or Japanese Domestic Men. Well, apparently you're not allowed to own people anymore, so in this video we're going to talk about some underrated JDCs, or Japanese Domestic Car. And this is fine because JDCs are tunable, fun, cool, and cheap, right? Well, it actually turns out they're not always cheap per se, like this Supra, which costs $200,000, but thankfully I have found some other cars that are actually very cheap because they're underrated. Now, first we have the 5th gen Honda Prelude, and this thing is basically like a Civic AMG. They come with a 4-pooper that makes 200 horsepower, they weigh about 3,000 pounds, 5-speed transmission, whatever, who cares? The important thing is, it looks great, okay? It's boxy, yet sleek somehow. They look more expensive than they really are, and that makes it a bargain at just $5,000. Next! Boom, Supra. That's too expensive. Boom, better looking, cheaper Supra. This is the Mark III Supra, and you can slam it, drift it, race it, I don't care. It'll do it. It comes with an inline 6-cylinder that is not the 2JZ, but it makes 200 horsepower, weighs about 3,500 pounds, and it looks about 11 times better than the shitty Mark IV Supra. Yeah, this is one of the best looking JDM cars. Still underrated somehow. $10,000. Next! Civics are boring. Well, not this one. Sedan, hatchback, wagon, whatever you want. This car does all the Civic things of being reliable, tunable, practical, fun-ish. This is one of the best looking Civics you could ever buy. It looks amazing slammed. You can also get a good one for like $5,000. And the best thing about this car is that in 1990 the Civic received a minor refresh which included NSX, overrated. Mark IV Supra, overhyped. VR4, underrated. This car is a twin-turbo 3-liter V6, makes like 300 horsepower, plus there's 4-wheel steering, 4-wheel drive, active aero, and a built-in butt plug for added sensations. It weighs about 4,000 pounds, and you can have this or a wife and kids, but you don't get to have both. This car will take all of your money and all of your time for the low price of just $15,000. Next! Hey man, do you like cigarettes? Well, good, because this is a smoker's car, right? It looks cool as fuck, so you gotta be cool as fuck to drive it, alright? Get a leather jacket and start smoking, you'll probably be good to go. 3-liter V6, and you could get a turbo. It weighs about 3,000 pounds, and this is one of the best looking JDM cars you can get for $5,000. Next! Do you want a Supra, but you're too poor? Ha! Poor! Well, good news, because this is basically a Supra, but more luxurious and also a bit heavier. So the SC300 had a non-turbo 2JZ, and the SC400 had a 1UZ V8. So that means you basically get the most sought-after Toyota engines in this car. So these cars have been gaining popularity in the drift scene, so if you find one with a manual, don't buy it, go out and buy a lottery ticket instead. But maybe, just maybe, you want 4 doors. Alright, or maybe you want 2 doors, or maybe you just can't make up your mind, and you usually let your wife tell you exactly what to do. Well then here is the perfect car, with a small engine to match your tiny car. The RX-8 has a 1.3-liter engine which uses black magic or something to make 240 horsepower. Someone told me how this car makes so much horsepower from a tiny engine, but I forgot. I think it had something to do with a triangle. But anyways, apparently these cars are fun to drive because they rev high and they handle well, but I think they ruined it by adding a stupid door in the back. It doesn't make any sense, it just ruins the entire car. Also, it's about as unreliable as an old man's driving. Do you want a Ferrari? Do you want a Ferrari? Well, you can't have one, alright? But you know what you can have is this car. The Mark I, the first generation MR2, mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, manual transmission. This is as close as you're gonna get to owning a Ferrari. It has a 1.6-liter engine that made some horsepower. I really don't know how much, probably not a lot. I mean, you don't get a lot of horsepower from 1.6 liters in the 80s, alright? But you can always swap in a modern engine, and they only weigh around 2,400 pounds, so this is basically the most fun car on this list. It would really be a shame if this car had some, unbeknownst to me, murderous tendency that made it always want to murder the driver in a corner. Oh well. Next! Are old Miatas overrated? No! Look at this one, perfectly good for only $500. Well, you know what's even less rated than that? Is the new ND Miata, alright? This is the most perfect, newest iteration of the Miata, and nobody talks about it. You get front engine, rear-wheel drive, 180 horsepower, and it weighs like 2,300 pounds. This thing is so fun, especially with a turbo, and it's probably one of the last truly light sports cars. And you get all of this, as well as great looks and reliability, for the rapidly declining price of just $25,000. Here's a real car. The Mitsubishi Starion competes with the 300ZX, the Supra, and the Armor 2 from this list, and it's actually the precursor to the VR4. That means it has similar boxy, awesome styling to those cars, and all of these came with a turbo, which means tuners can splooge all of it with their sticks and their rods and freaking make it go faster. Stock, these cars had about 200 horsepower, and they weigh about 3,000 pounds, and they're really rare. I haven't been able to find any on used car websites, so I'm just gonna say they're free. This is the most underrated car because they're completely free. For more underrated JDM cars, check out this video because I talk about some other JDM cars that are underrated that weren't on this list. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button or comment below. I really have no idea if you liked it otherwise, and consider subscribing if you want to see more similar content in the future.